I sat next to the woman who called my husband dead weight. The October rain drummed against the windows of St. Mary's Community Center in downtown Chicago as I adjusted my simple black cardigan and watched my husband Michael wheel himself toward the front of the room where the monthly police veterans meeting was about to begin. The familiar ache in my chest returned as I saw him struggle slightly with the manual wheelchair, his strong arms compensating for legs that hadn't worked properly since that terrible night 3 years ago when a drunk driver changed our lives forever. I had been sitting in the back row, trying to blend in with the other spouses and family members who attended these gatherings to support their loved ones dealing with various challenges from their law enforcement careers. Michael insisted on attending every month, finding comfort in sharing experiences with fellow officers who understood the unique struggles of transitioning from active duty to retirement, especially under circumstances none of them had planned for during their years of service. If this story is touching your heart, please comment below where you're watching from, give this video a like, and subscribe to our channel because we truly help families going through these difficult situations. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of overcoming adversity and finding strength in the darkest moments. What nobody in that room knew, including Michael himself, was that sitting quietly in my purse was a letter from Whitman & Associates Financial Management confirming that I now had complete control over the $10 million settlement fund that had been established after Michael's accident. The insurance company and the drunk driver's estate had fought the case for nearly 3 years, but 2 weeks ago, everything had been finalized, and I had made the decision to keep this information private until I could figure out the best way to handle our dramatically changed financial circumstances. For 32 years, I had been married to Michael O'Connor, a Chicago Police Department detective who had dedicated his life to serving and protecting our community, while I worked as a high school guidance counselor helping teenagers navigate their academic and personal challenges. We had lived modestly but comfortably in our 3-bedroom house in Beverly, raising our 2 children and saving carefully for a retirement that we had envisioned filled with travel, grandchildren, and the peaceful satisfaction of lives well lived in service to others. The accident had shattered more than just Michael's spine. It had destroyed his sense of identity and purpose in ways that no amount of physical therapy or counseling seemed able to fully address. The man who had once commanded respect in interrogation rooms and chased suspects through South Side alleys now struggled with basic tasks like reaching items on high shelves or navigating curbs in his wheelchair, and the psychological impact was often more challenging than the physical limitations. During the 3 years since the accident, I had watched my proud, independent husband battle depression, anger, and a profound sense of uselessness that broke my heart daily. He refused most help, insisted on maintaining as much independence as possible, and often became frustrated when well-meaning friends or family members tried to assist him with tasks he was determined to master on his own, even when it took him 3 times longer than it would have taken before his injury. The monthly veterans meetings had become one of the few activities that seemed to lift Michael's spirits, providing him with a sense of community and belonging that he had lost when he was forced to retire on disability. These gatherings brought together retired officers dealing with PTSD, physical injuries, alcoholism, and various other challenges that came with decades of witnessing the worst aspects of human nature while trying to maintain order and justice in an increasingly chaotic world. That particular October evening, a new member had joined the group, Detective Rebecca Morrison, a recently retired officer who had spent 25 years working white-collar crime investigations in the downtown financial district. She was an attractive woman in her early 50s, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit that looked out of place among the casual attire worn by most of the other attendees, and she carried herself with the confident air of someone accustomed to success and recognition. Rebecca had been assigned to sit at my table during the informal dinner portion of the meeting, and conversation had started pleasantly enough as she described her recent retirement and her plans to pursue consulting work with private security firms specializing in corporate fraud prevention. She spoke eloquently about her impressive case closure rate and the high-profile investigations she had led, clearly taking pride in her professional accomplishments and the respect she had earned among her colleagues. The atmosphere around our table was friendly and supportive as other spouses shared stories about their own adjustments to retirement life and the various challenges and opportunities that came with this new phase of their lives. Michael seemed more relaxed than usual, engaging in conversation and even laughing at a few jokes shared by the group, which warmed my heart since laughter had become increasingly rare in our household during the difficult years following his accident. However, the The tone of the evening shifted dramatically when the conversation turned to the topic of disability benefits and the different types of retirement situations represented among the group members. Rebecca began expressing her opinions about what she considered productive retirement versus what she viewed as dependency on the system, and her comments quickly revealed attitudes that made me increasingly uncomfortable as I listened to her elaborate on her personal philosophy regarding self-reliance and personal responsibility. When Michael mentioned that he was receiving disability payments due to his injury, Rebecca's expression changed noticeably, and she began asking probing questions about the circumstances of his accident and the extent of his limitations. Her inquiries seemed more like an interrogation than friendly conversation, and I could see Michael becoming defensive as she questioned the severity of his injuries and the necessity of his wheelchair use for daily activities. The situation escalated when Rebecca made a comment that would remain seared in my memory forever. Speaking to another woman at our table while gesturing toward Michael, she said, "I just think it's unfair that taxpayers have to support people who become dead weight after one accident. Some of us worked our entire careers without becoming a burden on society, and we shouldn't have to subsidize those who can't adapt to their circumstances and find ways to contribute productively." The silence that followed her words was deafening. Michael's face flushed red with anger and humiliation, and I watched as his hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The other people at our table looked shocked and uncomfortable, clearly recognizing the cruelty and insensitivity of Rebecca's statement. But nobody seemed to know how to respond to such an unexpected attack on one of their fellow veterans. Michael attempted to defend himself, explaining that he had served the community faithfully for 28 years before his injury, and that his disability benefits were compensation for sacrifices made in the line of duty, not charity or welfare. His voice shook with emotion as he described the physical pain he endured daily and the challenges of adapting to life with limited mobility. But Rebecca seemed unmoved by his explanation and continued to argue that truly strong people find ways to overcome obstacles instead of using them as excuses. The confrontation continued for several more minutes as Rebecca elaborated on her belief that disabled individuals who relied on government support were weakening society, and that real heroes found ways to remain productive regardless of their physical limitations. She cited examples of disabled individuals who had started businesses or pursued careers that accommodated their restrictions, implying that Michael's situation reflected a lack of motivation or creativity rather than genuine hardship. I sat quietly through this exchange, my anger building with each insensitive comment, while I struggled to maintain my composure and avoid creating a scene that would embarrass Michael further. Part of me wanted to defend my husband immediately, but I also recognized that he needed to handle this confrontation in his own way, maintaining whatever dignity he could in a situation that was already deeply humiliating for him in front of his peers. The other members of our group gradually excused themselves from the table, uncomfortable with the tension that had developed and unwilling to become involved in what was clearly becoming a personal conflict. Eventually, Michael wheeled himself away from the table in frustration, leaving me alone with Rebecca and one other woman who seemed too shocked by what she had witnessed to move from her seat. Rebecca, apparently oblivious to the impact of her words, turned to me and continued her monologue about personal responsibility and the burden that disabled individuals placed on productive members of society. She asked if I had considered how much better my life would be if I weren't tied down to someone who couldn't contribute to the household anymore, and suggested that I might want to reconsider my options while I was still young enough to find someone who could be a real partner. That was the moment when I made a decision that would change everything. I reached into my purse, pulled out the letter from the financial management company, and placed it on the table in front of Rebecca. Her eyes scanned the document, and I watched as her expression changed from confident superiority to confusion, then to shock, as she processed the information contained in the official letterhead and legal language describing the $10 million settlement fund. "This is the settlement for my husband's accident," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage burning inside me. The drunk driver who destroyed Michael's legs was a wealthy real estate developer with substantial assets and excellent insurance coverage. The legal battle took 3 years, but we finally received compensation that reflects the true cost of what Michael lost that night, including his career, his mobility, and his peace of mind. Rebecca stared at the document, clearly struggling to reconcile this new information with the assumptions she had made about our financial situation based on Michael's disability status and our modest appearance at the meeting. The letter clearly stated that I had been designated as the fund administrator with complete discretionary control over all disbursements and investment decisions, making me responsible for managing more wealth than most people would see in several lifetimes. I continued speaking, my voice growing stronger as I explained the irony of her comments about taxpayers supporting dead weight, when, in reality, Michael and I were now among the highest taxpayers in the Chicago metropolitan area. The investment returns from the settlement fund alone would generate more annual tax revenue than most working professionals would contribute during their entire careers, completely reversing the dynamic she had described. My husband sacrificed his body in service to this community, I said, looking directly into Rebecca's eyes. The compensation he received wasn't charity or welfare. It was payment for services rendered and injuries sustained while protecting people like you. The drunk driver who hit him was driving a Ferrari after leaving a corporate party where he had consumed alcohol for 3 hours, then decided to drive home through a residential neighborhood at twice the speed limit. The color had drained from Rebecca's face as she realized the magnitude of her mistake and the cruelty of her assumptions. She attempted to backtrack, mumbling apologies and claiming that she had misunderstood our situation, but the damage was already done. Her true character had been revealed through her willingness to attack someone she perceived as vulnerable and dependent, and no amount of explanation could undo the venom she had directed toward my husband. I retrieved the letter and returned it to my purse, then stood up to leave the table. Before walking away, I delivered a final message that I hoped would stay with Rebecca for the rest of her retirement years. Real strength, I said, is supporting each other through difficult times instead of attacking those who are struggling. Michael has shown more courage in adapting to his circumstances than you've demonstrated in your entire career. I found Michael near the coffee station, surrounded by several other veterans who were offering him support and expressing their outrage about Rebecca's behavior. Word had spread quickly through the room about the confrontation, and the general consensus was that her comments had been completely inappropriate and hurtful. Several members mentioned that they were considering speaking to the group organizers about establishing clearer guidelines regarding respectful communication during meetings. Michael was still visibly upset about the encounter, and I could see that Rebecca's words had reopened psychological wounds that we had been working for years to heal. The accusation that he was dead weight had struck at his deepest fears about his value and purpose since the accident, confirming insecurities that he struggled with daily despite my constant reassurance and support from family and friends. During the drive home that evening, Michael was quieter than usual, staring out the passenger window at the Chicago skyline while I navigated the familiar streets toward our Beverly neighborhood. I could sense him replaying the confrontation in his mind, probably wondering if there was truth in Rebecca's harsh assessment of his situation and his worth as a husband and community member. When we arrived home, I made the decision to share the news about the settlement fund. I had been waiting for the right moment to discuss our changed financial circumstances, wanting to ensure that Michael was emotionally prepared to handle the complex feelings that would inevitably accompany such a dramatic shift in our economic status after years of careful budgeting and financial concern about medical expenses and reduced income. I showed him the letter and explained everything that had transpired during the legal proceedings, including the extensive documentation of his injuries, the impact on his earning potential, and the determination that the settlement amount reflected fair compensation for the lifelong consequences of the accident. Michael read through the documents slowly, asking questions about the legal process and the investment strategy that had been established to preserve and grow the principal amount. The revelation was overwhelming for both of us, representing not just financial security but also a form of justice and recognition of the sacrifices Michael had made throughout his career and the losses he had suffered because of someone else's irresponsible decision. The settlement couldn't restore his mobility or erase the trauma of the accident, but it provided validation that his suffering had been acknowledged and compensated appropriately. Over the following weeks, we began the process of adjusting to our new financial reality while also processing the emotional impact of Rebecca's attack and the way it had forced us to confront deep-seated fears and insecurities about Michael's condition. We met with financial advisors, estate planning attorneys, and tax specialists to ensure that we were managing our resources responsibly and maximizing our ability to help others while securing our own future. One of our first decisions was to establish a foundation dedicated to supporting police officers who had been injured in the line of duty and their families during the difficult transition period following career-ending incidents. We wanted to ensure that other families wouldn't have to endure the financial stress and uncertainty that we had experienced during the 3 years while the legal case was pending and Michael's disability payments were our only source of income. The foundation would provide emergency financial assistance, counseling services, adaptive equipment, and advocacy support to help injured officers navigate the complex bureaucracy of disability benefits and insurance claims. We also plan to fund research into improved treatment options for spinal cord injuries and other conditions commonly affecting law enforcement personnel, hoping to contribute to medical advances that could help future victims of similar accidents. Michael found renewed purpose in developing the Foundation's programs and criteria, drawing on his own experience to identify the most critical needs and effective interventions. Working with other veterans and medical professionals, he created comprehensive support systems that addressed not just financial needs, but also the psychological and social challenges that accompanied sudden disability and forced retirement from law enforcement careers. 6 months after the confrontation with Rebecca, we attended another veterans meeting, this time as donors announcing the launch of the foundation and our commitment to supporting the law enforcement community. Michael spoke eloquently about his journey from despair to purpose, emphasizing that strength comes in many forms and that supporting each other through difficulties is one of the highest expressions of the brotherhood that binds police officers together. The response from the group was overwhelmingly positive, with several members immediately volunteering to help with foundation activities and outreach efforts. Many shared their own stories of struggle and recovery, creating an atmosphere of mutual support and understanding that stood in stark contrast to the judgment and criticism that Rebecca had expressed during her brief involvement with the group. Rebecca never returned to the meetings after that October evening, and we later learned through mutual acquaintances that she had been struggling with her own adjustment to retirement, having difficulty finding consulting work and dealing with financial pressures that contradicted the successful image she had projected. Her attack on Michael had apparently been motivated by her own insecurities and frustrations, rather than genuine beliefs about disability and social responsibility. 2 years later, Michael and I were invited to speak at a national conference for injured police officers and their families, sharing our story of resilience and the importance of community support during recovery. Michael had regained much of his confidence and sense of purpose through his work with the foundation, and while his physical condition remained unchanged, his emotional healing had been remarkable to witness. During his presentation, Michael addressed the issue of perceived worth and social contribution, explaining that value as a human being isn't determined by physical capability or earning potential, but by character, compassion, and the positive impact we have on others' lives. He spoke about the danger of judging people based on their circumstances rather than their hearts and actions, and the importance of offering support rather than criticism to those who are struggling. The conference audience included hundreds of officers and family members dealing with various types of career-ending injuries and transitions, and Michael's message of hope and perseverance resonated deeply with people who had faced similar challenges and self-doubt. Many approached us afterward to share their own stories and express gratitude for the Foundation's work and the inspiration they had drawn from our presentation. 3 years after that painful evening when Rebecca called my husband dead weight, Michael received the Distinguished Service Award from the Chicago Police Department for his contributions to officer welfare and community service through the Foundation. The ceremony was attended by hundreds of active and retired officers, city officials, and community leaders who recognized the significant impact of his post-injury advocacy and support work. In his acceptance speech, Michael reflected on the journey from despair to purpose, acknowledging that his accident had been devastating but had also opened doors to serve his fellow officers in ways he never could have imagined during his active duty years. He spoke about the importance of redefining strength and success after life-changing events, and the power of community support in helping individuals discover new sources of meaning and contribution. Today, 5 years after Rebecca's cruel comments revealed her own character flaws while attempting to diminish my husband's worth, the Foundation has assisted over 300 injured officers and their families, distributed more than $2 million in emergency aid, and funded groundbreaking research that has led to improved treatment protocols for spinal cord injuries and other trauma commonly affecting law enforcement personnel. Michael has found peace with his physical limitations and discovered that his most important contributions to society came after his accident rather than before it. The settlement that initially seemed like compensation for loss has become a tool for transformation, allowing us to create positive change in the lives of others who face similar challenges and helping to build stronger support systems within the law enforcement community. The woman who once sat next to me and called my husband dead weight had no idea that her target controlled resources that would ultimately benefit hundreds of families and contribute to advancing medical treatment for injured officers nationwide. Her ignorance and cruelty had revealed more about her own character than about Michael's worth, and her words had ultimately motivated us to prove that strength and value come in many forms, including the determination to help others even when facing your own struggles. The $10 million fund that Rebecca never knew existed has grown to over $15 million through careful investment and continues to generate resources for the Foundation's expanding programs. But more importantly, it has given Michael and me the opportunity to transform personal tragedy into community service, demonstrating that even the most devastating setbacks can become the foundation for meaningful contribution and positive impact. Our story has become one of redemption and purpose, showing that true wealth lies not in financial resources, but in the ability to support others through difficult times and create lasting positive change in the world. The accident that ended Michael's career as a detective began his career as an advocate and community leader, proving that sometimes the most important chapters of our lives begin after we think our stories have ended. If this story has touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to comment below and let us know where you are watching from, as well as your thoughts on family dynamics like this. Every perspective matters, because stories like these remind us that while families may face struggles, challenges, and even heartbreak, there is always an opportunity for healing, connection, and growth. By sharing your own reflections, you not only add to the conversation but also create a ripple effect of encouragement for others who may be experiencing something similar. When you engage, whether it's through commenting, liking, or subscribing, you are helping us build a space where families can feel less alone and more supported. Many people silently carry burdens within their homes, and often just hearing that someone else understands can provide an enormous sense of relief and hope. This channel is more than a platform for stories. It's a community where resilience, compassion, and solidarity take center stage. Your support allows us to continue creating and sharing content that uplifts, inspires, and shines a light on the very real challenges that families go through. We believe that even in the most difficult circumstances, there are lessons to be learned and strength to be found. And together, by engaging with these stories, we can remind one another that no family has to navigate their journey in isolation. So please, if this message resonates with you, don't hesitate to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you're not just supporting us. You're standing with countless families around the world who find courage and comfort in knowing that they are part of a wider circle of understanding and care. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for helping us continue to share these powerful stories of resilience and hope.